What was meant to be a standard late-night conversation often unraveled into absolute disorder. Johnny Carson, a host known for calm control, precision, and understated humor, relied heavily on structure to guide his interviews. This particular guest, however, turned every appearance into something closer to chaotic theater than light entertainment. She constantly interrupted, spoke over Carson, and steered conversations in unpredictable directions, leaving the famously unshakable host visibly irritated. His patience was tested repeatedly. One especially memorable moment came when she abruptly took off her shoe during the interview and handed it to Carson, a strange and impulsive gesture that completely disrupted his rhythm. While parts of the audience laughed at the absurdity, Carson was clearly unsettled, attempting to restore order without drawing attention to the discomfort. She was also notorious for redirecting discussions toward herself, ignoring Carson's questions, and seizing control of the exchange. That left little space for the playful back-and-forth Carson enjoyed most. Rather than building comedic momentum, these interviews often felt tense, erratic, and confrontational, something Carson quietly came to dread. Though she was undeniably talented and made for compelling television, her aggressive energy clashed sharply with Carson's smooth, professional style. For a host who valued pacing and polish, her visits felt less like performances and more like tempests. Some guests caused chaos deliberately for laughs. Others did so unintentionally. She did it boldly and without apology, and Carson never quite figured out how to handle it. It's rare for a talk show host to sit across from another talk show host, but when it happened on The Tonight Show, the results were often uncomfortable. One such guest, a confident, outspoken broadcaster with a strong following of his own, brought tension instead of ease. Accustomed to commanding his own desk, he carried his intense, unpredictable approach with him. His show thrived on that style, but when he appeared opposite Johnny Carson, he either couldn't or wouldn't dial it back. Rather than settling into the role of a guest, he repeatedly attempted to take control. Carson, who prided himself on steering conversations with grace and subtle authority, found himself challenged. This guest had a habit of dominating discussions and launching into lengthy monologues, frequently hijacking the interview and pulling attention toward himself, not merely through charisma, but by overtly seizing the floor. For Carson, this crossed a line. It wasn't just irritating. It threatened the role he had perfected over decades. Their personalities fundamentally clashed. Carson was reserved and deliberate, carefully pacing each segment for maximum entertainment. His guest thrived on confrontation, more comfortable debating than bantering. While Carson could manage strong personalities, this tension disrupted the rhythm of the show rather than enhancing it. Despite sharing the same profession, or perhaps because of it, the two never appeared comfortable together. Their exchanges were marked not by warmth, but by subtle battles for dominance. In the end, it felt less like hosting a guest and more like confronting a rival, something Carson had little tolerance for. Few guests embody glamour, drama, and unpredictability quite like the European-born actress and socialite known for her extravagant lifestyle. Wherever she went, headlines followed. On The Tonight Show, her oversized personality frequently clashed with Carson's measured, conversational approach. From the moment she stepped on stage, it was clear she intended to command attention. She spoke loudly, interrupted frequently, and rarely stayed focused. Carson, who relied on timing and sharp exchanges, struggled to establish any rhythm. She had no interest in being set up for jokes. She delivered her own, whether or not they landed. Making matters worse, she resisted self-deprecating humor. Carson often relied on gentle teasing, but she bristled at becoming the target of a joke. Instead of playing along, she pushed back defensively, turning what should have been light banter into awkward sparring. She also routinely commandeered the conversation, responding to questions with long, wandering monologues that drifted far off topic. For a host who valued structure, these moments created dead air and stalled momentum. Audiences may have been captivated by her unpredictability, but for Carson, each appearance felt like walking a tightrope. He had to remain courteous, keep the show moving, and avoid emotional landmines, all while trying to stay funny. She was undeniably a spectacle, but Carson wasn't searching for spectacle. He preferred guests who understood how to share the spotlight. Inviting a controversial novelist with a razor-sharp intellect and an even sharper ego was always a high-risk move. When such a figure appeared on The Tonight Show, Carson quickly recognized the challenge. The guest was a celebrated writer, a Pulitzer Prize winner, and a notorious provocateur. He was also widely regarded as one of the most difficult individuals Carson ever interviewed. Carson favored light, witty exchanges, but this guest thrived on confrontation. He didn't simply respond to questions, he challenged them, transforming simple prompts into intense intellectual debates. The tone could shift from playful to combative in seconds. For Carson, who meticulously curated pacing and flow, this was disastrous. The guest also monopolized airtime, speaking endlessly without pause. While some viewers admired his boldness and brilliance, others noticed the strain behind Carson's polite smile. Adding to the tension was the guest's disdain for late-night decorum. He rejected the format entirely, steering conversations toward divisive topics like politics, gender, and moral decline. While such discussions might have suited a lecture hall or literary forum, they clashed with the escapist atmosphere Carson had built. Carson was rarely rattled, but with this guest, he often looked eager for the segment to end. There was no rhythm, no chemistry, just friction disguised as conversation. Two men with opposing goals share the stage, and only one of them seemed to understand it was meant to be entertaining. Some guests brought charm, others attempted to dominate. Few embodied the latter more than this legendary Hollywood heartthrob. His charisma was undeniable, but his appearances frequently left Carson visibly drained. A true star of the golden age, he possessed endless stories, boundless energy, and a commanding presence. But when seated across from Carson, he often overdid it. Instead of engaging in a relaxed exchange, he launched into long, meandering tales about his career, relationships, and past glory. These weren't concise anecdotes designed for laughs. They were sprawling monologues. Carson struggled to interject, not for lack of effort, but because there was no opening. The guest dominated the couch, turning conversations into one-man performances. Everything he said reinforced his legendary image. It wasn't about connection, it was about self-promotion. For Carson, who preferred humility and shared spotlight, this became exhausting. While always professional on air, subtle signs spoke volumes. Forced smiles, shortened segments, fewer invitations. It wasn't animosity, but it was clear Carson didn't enjoy being overshadowed on his own stage. He wanted charm, not ego. Stories, not lectures. When guests refused to make room, the interview stopped being fun. Most guests tested Carson's patience unintentionally. One comedian, however, turned chaos into an art form. As one of the most iconic insult comics in history, he brought relentless energy, rapid-fire jabs, and complete disregard for structure. Carson admired him, but managing the madness was exhausting. From the moment he appeared, the show's format dissolved. He interrupted freely, wandered off script, roasted the audience, and targeted the crew. Carson, known for precision and timing, was often swept into the storm. One legendary incident summed up their relationship perfectly. The comedian broke Carson's cigarette case while guest hosting the show. The following night, Carson appeared on the comedian's sitcom to confront him on camera. The moment became television history, hilarious yet revealing. Beneath the laughs, tension existed. The comic's insults often hit personal territory Carson rarely shared publicly. Though Carson played along, flashes of discomfort were visible. Still, mutual respect endured. Few guests could push Carson so far and still be welcomed back. Every appearance was a gamble. Unpredictable, exhausting, and unforgettable. When the heavyweight champion appeared on The Tonight Show, the energy shifted instantly. He wasn't just a sports figure, he was a global icon, political voice, and cultural force. Charismatic and magnetic, he commanded the room effortlessly. For Carson, these interviews were thrilling but challenging. behind the smiles lay a struggle for control. The champion didn't adapt to the late-night mold, he bent it. He spoke at length, seized moments, and shifted between humor and seriousness without warning. Carson admired his presence, but often struggled to find footing, especially when discussions turned to race, war, or religion. There were moments of brilliance and genuine respect, but also stretches where Carson appeared unsure how to respond without derailing the show. The champion wasn't difficult. He was unapologetically himself. But that raw authenticity didn't always leave space for Carson's carefully balanced approach. The contrast made their interviews compelling, but undeniably uneasy. Few guests commanded attention like the legendary film star famous for bold sensuality and provocative wit. By the time she appeared on The Tonight Show, her reputation was well established. Carson, known for restraint and subtle timing, often found himself navigating discomfort. She treated interviews as performances, filling every exchange with innuendo and flirtation. While audiences laughed, Carson appeared increasingly uneasy. Each question invited a suggestive response, pushing boundaries he preferred not to cross. Though he respected her legacy, her refusal to adapt to the show's rhythm left him off balance. What should have been brief segments stretched into endurance tests. Her appearances were unforgettable, but rarely enjoyable for Carson. Johnny Carson made hosting look effortless, but behind the desk was a man constantly managing egos, unpredictability, and chaos. Even legends have limits. From rigid performers to outspoken rivals and unpredictable personalities, each encounter shaped late-night television history. These moments remind us that professionalism has boundaries. Now it's your turn. Who surprised you most? Did anyone on this list catch you off guard? Share your thoughts, and if you enjoyed this deep dive into television history, like the video, subscribe, and stay tuned for more stories from Hollywood's golden era.